Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react. Welcome back to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. I am Kyle. That is Sean. Sean, we have a few things to check in on. It's been a couple of weeks since we've checked in. And so I think you have two things, right? And what were those?
Yeah, I think it's important that we recognize, though, that the season is coming to an end for us. That means we take a little bit of time off from the weekly production schedule. And I can feel that it's about that time because things are starting to pile up. However, when it comes to the one things, a couple weeks ago, I said, I'm going to get out and vote. Of course, I did that. And then I think it was last week, I said, I need to drink more water. So the goal was 75 ounces a day. And I did that 5 out of my 7 days. So, I certainly consumed a lot more water than normal. So, so I'm feeling good about that as well. You had a couple things going on, obviously a big move and lots of stuff in your world. So what have you been working on?
So my one thing I think from a couple weeks ago was to just get everything unpacked and out of boxes. And there has definitely been some progress on that, but it's not complete yet. There's still boxes in almost every room. And I say almost because I actually did make some progress. I unpacked the bathroom, and so that is all in the cupboards now. So that's good.
You know what? This explains so much. So for our listeners' sake, Kyle and I, most of you know, we're on separate sides of the country, right? Kyle's in Pennsylvania. I'm in California. Kyle normally has his camera set up to where it's like straight on. I can kind of see behind him. And well, now right now, for the last couple weeks, Kyle's been angled up. So I'm basically staring up his nose and at the ceiling, which means I cannot see anything like 2 feet beyond the ceiling or below.
That's really the advantage of Zoom. The reality is only in this little box here. Everything outside the box can wait till later.
Or everything else is perfect, right? There's nothing to be concerned about. Kyle, I wanted to ask last week, episode 126, we had an interview or discussion with an incredible man, Chris Doveton, and we have since, or you for sure, have received his book. Mine's in the mail.
Right.
And you started reading. I'm curious, can you share with us what your initial thoughts are? Are you enjoying it?
Yeah, I am enjoying it. I mean, obviously, we had a decent overview of the whole concept and the whole book in the episode. And so I'm learning it for the second time, which is actually kind of cool because I was able to process it and then dig a little deeper when I'm reading it, right? But it's really well written and the story really comes through and obviously getting a lot more detail. So yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Nice. We barely touched on it in the interview, and I'm really looking forward to digging in just based on the title. The whole idea of I'm fine, thanks. Like, I don't want to get into it with you, whether it's a friend or a perfect stranger. We just it's a common response. I'm good. Yeah, I'm fine. Whatever. So just that alone, I'm looking forward to getting into how he wrestled and worked through that season of life. So what's on your mind today? Kyle's been in charge of putting some thoughts down for this episode, and we haven't dialogued a whole lot. So tell me, Kyle, to our listeners, what are we going to tackle today?
So a lot of and a lot of other people know that I bought a house in 2006, and that was the wrong time to buy a house because the economy fell apart in like 07, 08,
Yeah.
and it didn't go back. It didn't start picking back up until like 2011 or so.
Yeah.
And that's when I sold my house.
Yeah.
So I bought a high and sold low, like
Mm.
just totally wrong thing to do. And I just had no perspective. And I realize now that one of the aspects of that was that in my life, since the diagnosis of FA, I feel like I've tried to identify things that I'm like, all right, maybe I can lock this in so that it's in place when FA gets bad. Because that's the nature of a progressive disease, right? And I talked
Sure.
about that in my book a little bit too with, I tried to lock in a girlfriend in college, and that didn't work out.
Been there.
And so this has been on my mind lately because I'm jumping into the house thing again, and I'm just thinking, all right, am I in over my head again? I really don't think I am, because I'm doing it way differently this time
Mm.
and with a lot more perspective. But it just comes to mind, am I still doing things that I'm like jumping into way too quickly because I'm trying to lock stuff down?
Sure, maybe trying to either hurry it along or uh, basically cut out all that waiting period or see what happens kind of time, because we know with a rare disease or even something like cancer, life could change quickly and without warning, right?
Right.
So, great question or topic idea. Things that are coming to mind in terms of, whether it's age or having to do with career or love life or, major purchases like a house. When it comes to those moments and those decisions, how much does our diagnosis play into it?
Yeah. And I guess part of what you're saying there is that, there's lots of other factors.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
I think, one thing I've talked about before is that we tend to blame our disease for everything. And in these things and in everything, it's
Mm,
not the only factor. So
mm.
I think that's kind of a good angle as well.
I don't blame FA.
But does it like influence your decisions, even just in your own head? You're like, oh, well, I'm going to be way more severely disabled in the future, so I better do this differently than I would have if I didn't have FA. Does that come into the picture?
Sure, immediately I think about my current vehicle. I went and bought a Subaru Outback a couple of years ago. And part of that reason, or part of the reason for buying such a car was, to transport my trike.
Hmm.
But also in the back of my head, I thought, will a wheelchair work in this car down the
Yeah.
road? Is this car going to be okay for, things like that? And I would say it was in the back of my head. I don't know how much it influenced the decision to buy that car, but I know that even if I had the means, I would never consider a Corvette or
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
just a two-seater like
Right.
Nissan Z or Toyota, whatever, a small car that's not 80 grand.
You're right.
I would never think about those today because I know down the road, I expect they won't be that functional for me. Like I would never go buy a motorcycle, right?
Right.
It's not ideal. So
Right.
I think to an extent, whether it's conscious or intentional or subconscious, I bet we are making decisions based on or influenced by our condition.
Especially at the beginning of the FA, I was afraid of how it was going to affect my ability to earn a paycheck.
Mm,
And So do I need to set my expectations lower and my expectations of myself lower because of FA, and lots of different aspects of my life, I feel like, kind of fell into that. Not only my ability to earn a paycheck, which actually does influence a lot of different things in my life, or like the girlfriend thing from my book. In my head, it was going to be easier to find somebody who was okay with my abilities back then than it would be to find somebody that is okay with a guy in a wheelchair 100% of the time. So those are the things that I'm thinking of, especially thinking back to when I was first diagnosed.
Sure. I feel like if we just talk about the boyfriend girlfriend thing for a minute, I'm willing to bet that's a big concern for a lot of people, right? Disease or no disease. I feel like I know a lot of females specifically that are in a hurry to get married and have children.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's I don't know the reasoning for it, but I wonder if maybe part of it is because their internal clock for being able to have kids is different for guys. So maybe they, I don't think anybody wants to be 70 and have a 13-year-old at home, right? Yeah, like that's just a different way of living, or a different way of life. So I 100% agree with the notion that a lot of our decisions are influenced by what we expect or what we think is going to happen, whether it's disease related or not. To me, I don't know that it matters. Guaranteed something is influencing our decision to do it now or put it off a little bit or buy that one, not the other one.
I think a lot of it is clock management. I think FA and a progressive disease, it speeds up that clock a little bit, right? So it puts a little more pressure sometimes, I think. But I guess in hindsight, like, I don't know, maybe it's the difference between like living in the moment and doing what is in front of us and thinking about what might happen. And most of the time that vision is different than what actually happens. It's probably very rare that we think ahead in life and what we're thinking actually happens. And so maybe it's better to stay in the moment to a certain extent. What do you?
Well, yeah, I believe being in the moment's important, but I also believe it's important to have a master vision for your life too.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what are you working on? What are you working towards? It's important to have those goals and objectives in mind. So to an extent, it's a little bit of both, right? Whether it's a disease or a diagnosis or just living life healthy and the way anybody else would.
Right.
I wonder, thinking about this concept or this train of thought, I wonder if knowing what the common prognosis is for our disease or anybody else's, does that alone cause us to hesitate at all in making transitions? You talk about the influence of our prognosis hurrying us along, right? Like I gotta hurry and buy a house. I gotta hurry and get married, and I gotta hurry and fall in love, and I gotta hurry and make as much money as I can because down the road I'm not gonna be as valuable. Whatever.
Right.
Does our prognosis, I wonder, cause us to hesitate in accepting some major changes or transitions along the way? For example, last year we talked about you buying a motorized sort of, I don't know what you call it, a motorized chair.
Yeah, power chair. Yeah.
Is something you could have done years prior, right? And that would have been awesome, like so much easier.
Right. Right.
Did you put it off because you knew that that's like another step in a direction you don't want to go? Or did you put it off because you didn't physically have to yet go that route? Does that make
Yeah, no,
sense?
I totally agree with what you're saying. Like, I think of the ramp van is a good
Mm,
example for me. Like, I totally put that off because I was like, no, no way, I don't need that yet.
sure.
But it's been an absolute blessing in my life, and I think we can point to multiple things in that realm. And so it's that resistance to what we had thought our vision might be and then what's actually happening in our lives.
Mm.
And I think that's, what I related to a lot of times, because even the progression of my disease, I'm like, oh, I don't need this yet, but then I'm like, no, what are you talking about? You've been needing this for 2 years now,
Yeah,
so
for me personally, we've said it 100 times, but I broke my leg last year, right? And just over the last 3 months, finally got to a place where I'm walking freestyle, if you will, no cane or anything.
yeah.
But when I'm at work or I am walking around the building at work or I go to Target or wherever else IKEA the other day, I always grab a shopping cart, even though I'm only buying one thing. I grab a
Mhm.
shopping cart and treat it as a walker, right? It keeps me, I'm able to move a little bit faster. I'm able to move more controlled. And I feel like less people stare at me with concern.
Yeah, yeah, or think you're wasted at 10
Yeah.
AM.
So
Yeah.
in the back of my head, I thought a couple times I should buy a walker. I had one for rehab, but it was the static traditional walker that you pick up and move a couple inches with. But
Yeah.
in my head, I'm thinking, well, maybe I should get one of the ones with wheels, right? Because there won't always be a shopping cart available wherever I go. I
Yeah.
don't I don't believe I need a wheelchair. That's not where I'm at right now. But I've been thinking quite a bit, like, why don't I buy one of a rolling walker with wheels, like at the airport? I guarantee you that would be so much more useful and helpful at places like that. And now having this conversation, I feel like just brings it to the front of my mind.
Yeah.
Why am I not doing it? Like, why haven't I invested the $100 or 200, whatever it is, to get one and have that safety tool at my uh, disposal?
Right. So, yeah, you're asking the question, Sean. So, right back at you. Why not? Like, what are your reasons, you think?
Some of it's gonna be my unwillingness to accept that next step. Some of it is tied to finances. I don't really want to give up $200 for a walker. Those are the two big ones.
Yeah.
There's also in the back of my head this machismo, right? That
Yeah,
says
totally.
I don't I don't need it yet. I can make do with my own ability, a shopping cart or a wall here and there, or even a friend, grabbing onto their arm.
For me, some of the stuff that entered my head was, do I need to sit down in a wheelchair? Like, all those thoughts about machismo and I don't need it yet, and this is, I really don't want this thing. But then weighed against, what if something really bad happens
Mm,
and it rushes me towards the wheelchair?
mhm.
Like, I'd rather it be a choice maybe than be forced into it, I guess.
That
I don't know.
makes
Even though that choice is really hard, maybe it's easier to be forced. I don't know.
sure makes sense. I I was okay with the wheelchair last year or earlier this year because it wasn't my choice. I
Yeah.
could easily say, somebody looked at me, oh, what happened? And it was easy to say, I broke my leg, as opposed to admitting that I made the decision because it was safer.
Yeah.
which, could open the door for a really incredible conversation about rare disease and FA and awareness. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I don't know that my motivation would be to raise awareness. you
Right.
know.
Yeah. Well, and I think the hardest thing is, when is it a choice and when is it required? There is no, like, where does it cross that line? Because there's certainly a line somewhere, right? Where it's not reasonable to try to walk anymore. And where is that?
There's no black and white answer, right? It's not like, okay, on the 30th fall, it's
Yeah.
time for a chair, or the 17th or whatever. It's important for everybody to spend time with this in their own head, right? What's
Yeah.
safest for them, and do what is best for their abilities, right? We have friends, whether through social media or people we've actually met and hung out with, that probably could walk on their own but struggle. And even you and I felt like it's just so much easier to use a chair. It's so much safer, especially if you're a parent and you've got a little toddler or a baby. It's risky to walk with your child in your arm, right? But if you're
Yeah.
in a chair, it's so much easier to put them on your lap and roll over to the couch and cuddle up on a
Yeah.
movie, or feed them and whatever.
Yeah, you say it's important for us each to wrestle with it in our own head. And I think that's a really good point, because I think part of the reason that I put things off, and maybe we all do, is that we just don't want to face it.
Mm.
And maybe that's not a good reason, right? If you just ignore it and you don't make a decision, a conscious decision, maybe that is a decision, right?
Sure.
Practically in your life. And so I think we would both encourage people to think about it, consciously think about it, and maybe make a decision. and
Mm.
and then, if the decision is to hold off, fine. But if you hold off just because you don't want to face it, maybe that is not a good reason.
Sure. I agree with that. And this makes me think of another. I have no idea what the episode number is, but I had written a column and we then talked about it on the podcast, I think. The idea that determination is
Mhm.
really, really close to
To stubborn.
stubbornness,
Yeah.
or vice versa. Like, where is that fine line between I'm determined to accomplish and achieve on my own versus I'm so incredibly stubborn. I'm not thinking about what's safe or what's best. I'm putting a lot more at risk than I would want to if I really thought this through.
Yep. Yep.
So,
I
with that
agree.
in mind, obviously we won't rehash the whole thing, but I would encourage our listeners to think about that. What's best for you? What's safest for you? What's good for your family and your home life? And wrestle on purpose with that
Mhm.
balance, or that fine line between being stubborn and being determined.
Yep.
Good luck with that.
And you know what? Tell us what you think too. We would absolutely love to hear from you
Yeah.
about this topic. And so reach out to us any way you want on social media, email, give us a call, text, whatever.
That's part of what makes community strong, right? I don't know it all. You don't know it all. We've learned so much from other people's perspectives
Right.
and ways of living and working through stuff. So we value everybody's or other people's opinions and perspectives. So, Kyle, let's shift gears. We're almost through with season 4. We've added this season one thing we're going to work on every week. So, what is one thing you're going to work on this week?
Well, this one is a little bit of a continuation of my commitment from a few weeks ago to get everything unpacked. But Sean, like you said, my camera is facing towards the ceiling, partly because I don't have my podcast studio set up yet. And so that is my goal for this week. I'm part of the way there because I did a little bit last night. But the goal is to get it locked down by next week.
Cool. At some point, you're gonna have to move on, right? You can't keep doing variations of the condo. I'm just kidding. I'm going to get back in the gym.
Ooh, nice.
One thing I valued over the last 8 or 9 months was not having the pressure, right, of having to go every day after work or 5 days. I haven't been back yet, so I don't know what to expect. I don't know if I'll, feel safe, but I'm pretty confident they've reduced numbers. They're taking extra steps to keep it clean. So I'm committing 3 times in a week. And I'm going to do just 1 week to see if going back to a public gym is the right thing to do right now for me. So it may or may not last, but I'm at least going to visit 3 times this week and see about building that back into my routine.
Nice. Have you been doing in-home workouts in the meantime?
Yeah, not as consistently or as dramatically as the gym, right? I can only do so much with a couple dumbbells and resistance bands and calisthenics, right? I don't. So yes, but not the same.
I also feel like there's something that happens in the transition between home and the gym, right? Like your intentionality really changes. So it's certainly something way different when you're actually going in there.
It's much easier to stop. If I'm at home doing it and I get hungry, I can stop and go, go into the kitchen and grab a cookie. But if I'm at the gym, I'm like, all right, let's work through this a little harder, a little faster, and then go home and usually eat something a little healthier.
Have 2 cookies.
And finally, in closing, some thank you notes of gratitude. Kyle, who are you saying thank you?
I've had a few phone calls with Bill, the maintenance guy at my new condo complex, about the modifications I'm making in my house. And he also set up a accessible parking placard in the parking lot for me. And I've got his phone number, and so we text back and forth, which is really it's just nice to be able to communicate and understand that somebody's on the other end, like working to make things better. So Bill, the maintenance guy at my condo complex, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, it gotta feel good to know that you can text and somebody is willing to work on your behalf.
Exactly. Yep.
Whatever degree that may be.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say thank you to another coworker. There was a little group project, and I was talking to somebody that was hired about 3 years ago. And this person is already a rock star in our company. They have been transferred 3 different stores in leadership positions, which, in our world, that's a good thing, right? A different challenge, a unique set of people, business, whatever. So this person is literally known throughout our company. We have 2,000 some associates. She's already a rock star. And we were just talking, reminiscing about the time she got hired when she was 17, right? So she's only 20. First job, high school, part-time, bagger, nothing special. And she was talking about my orientation because I remember having you and this, that, and the other. And she had made the comment, Sean, I remember sitting in your session and thinking to myself, this is more than just a job. I think I'm gonna love it here. And she went all in. even though initially it was just a job.
Right.
In that session and through presentation, she was convinced that there's something pretty awesome here. And to hear her give me that kind of affirmation was really, really
Yeah.
encouraging and really just made me feel great because it's retail and not a lot of people, right, commit their life to retail. Not that we have made a oath, but there's a certain degree of being all in.
Right.
And hearing that this all-star decided to go all in because of a couple hours with me just reinforces and reminds me that I'm doing something good and maybe having an influence in different lives. So not to pat myself on the back, but to just express a thank you for this person sharing that and reinforcing what I'm doing, right? And what I've committed my time to. So Callan, thank you for the encouraging words.
When we make comments like that, it really makes a big impact.
That's the whole point of this exercise, right? It's feeling some gratitude, being thankful, and making it a point to express it, whether it's verbal or a text or sending somebody a card or whatever it may be. I'm reminded of a quote that I used to have in an old office. I at the time I believed it was anonymous, but it might be attributed to different people. I have no idea, but it goes something like this: feeling gratitude and not expressing it is like buying a gift and never giving it. Like, why
Yeah.
in the world? Why would you do that? And
Yeah.
to the person you purchased the gift for, it means nothing to them if you never gave it, right? Then you
Right.
don't get credit because you thought about it. You
Yeah. Yeah.
get credit because you executed it. So, a reminder to everybody to express gratitude in your own life today. Something, someone, express gratitude, say thank you, make it a point to do so. Thank you to you for tuning in today, for listening to another episode of Kyle and Sean Rambling. We look forward to joining you again in episode 128, which will be an awesome conversation. And Kyle, tell us a bit about what we have in store for our listeners next
Yeah,
week.
we have a great interview with Al Friedman, and we're talking about episode 123. You know, one of the things that Sean said in that episode was, I think we might need some professional help with this. And
Definitely.
Dr. Al Friedman is a psychologist, and we're really excited to talk to him about authenticity and why we sort of pull back from our friends and family when things get hard.
He agreed to come on and set us straight. So, looking forward to sharing that conversation with you all next week. Until then,
Keep living with urgency. Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast.
find us online at twodisableddudes.com and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Special thanks to our friend and audio producer, Jake Tompkins.